On July 27, 1893, while scouting a new pass to the Athabasca, Rockies explorer Arthur P. Coleman and his brother Lucius, joined by Louis B. Stewart, ascended an unnamed peak over 3,100 meters, rising over the headwaters of Beauty Creek. He writes in his journal, "To solve the problem of the pass, we climbed a higher mountain next day, a tilted block like all the peaks along the Brazeau, but so steeply tilted, with so rugged a surface of limestone, it was no sidewalk to ascend. From the top we had one of the finest panoramas in the Rockies. If one of Canada's earliest and most prolific Rockies explorers says a peak has one of the finest panoramas in the Rockies, you should probably sit up and take notice." So that's exactly what we did. Over 2 days in early August 2023, Wietze and I ascended 4 peaks in the Beauty Creek area via the Wilcox Pass Trail from Tangle Falls and the untracked Tangle Pass. On day 1, we left the parking lot at 0800 hours, hiking briskly up the Wilcox Pass Trail before crossing Tangle Creek and hiking up to Tangle Pass. From the pass, we descended into the lovely Beauty Creek Valley, crossing the creek and hiking past south slopes of Wurzburg Peak to the Beauty Lakes. We passed the lakes and continued up easy south slopes of Struan Peak before descending and traversing back around to Wurzburg's south rubble slopes. We ascended endless rubble on Wurzburg Peak to its summit before a painful stumble back down to Beauty Creek Valley. Daylight was fading as we hiked up valley and tackled endless steep scree slopes to Andover Peak South Ridge and easily from there to the summit, with stunning views. It was now too late to ascend Skye, so we returned to the parkway. Day 2 was a slog. After returning to the upper Beauty Creek Valley, we looked for a route up Skye Peak from the Andover Call. Alas, this route wasn't straightforward or advised. We traversed an upper bench back down valley before cutting up steep, dirty slopes to gain the northwest ridge. Moderate scrambling along the never-ending northwest ridge finally brought us to the summit of Skye Peak with more stunning views, especially towards the Columbia Icefields. We descended south slopes with beautiful views over Wilcox Lake before cutting west across the expansive Wilcox meadows to intersect the trail. Finally, we followed the Wilcox Pass Trail back out to Tangle Falls and a very busy trailhead along Highway 93. After making the long drive to the Tangle Falls parking area on Highway 11, we started up the unofficial trail leading to Wilcox Pass from the north. The trail was in great shape and we quickly made progress before cutting across Tangle Creek and angling steeply through light forest up to Tangle Pass. Early morning views back over the parkway to the northern Columbia Icefields were incredible. From the pass, I got my first glimpses into the Beauty Creek area, and they did not disappoint. Sunwapta Peak's huge southwest slopes at left rose to the heavens with Wurzburg, Struan, and Andover Peak completing the panorama. Although Beauty Creek was far below, it didn't look too bad from the pass. Of course, the valley and creek were also lovely, being almost entirely above treeline at this point. We knew we had to cross the creek before continuing up valley past the south end of Wurzburg up to the Beauty Lakes Basin to access south slopes of Struan. We had very little beta other than some first-hand feedback from Eric Coulthard, who dubbed this peak chilly after the way he was feeling while ascending it. He assured me that the ascent was pretty simple. The only other trip report I could find online was on Bivouac from Klaus Herring in 1987. After crossing a lively but small Beauty Creek, didn't even get wet feet, we continued into the Beauty Lakes Basin, eager to get our first glimpses of the lakes. It was also nice to finally be ascending to our first peak after losing a bunch of elevation over Tangle Pass. First views of the lakes did not disappoint. We continued our way into the basin, taking in views of more and more of the Beauty Lakes as we progressed on slabs and rubble, and finally took in glimpses of our first peak. The south ridge looked like a pile of rubble, but also looked like a hike. We started up rubble slopes, slowly inching our way onto the broad south ridge and from there to the summit. It took a while, but it was all very easy. Views back over Wurzburg were actually stunning, with an unexpected glacier covering its northeast face. Summit of Struan. Only around 4.5 hours from the parking lot, we found ourselves on top of Struan Peak with stunning summer views in every direction. Holy! Views over Jonas Pass. Wow. Sunwapta, Woolly Diadem, Alberta, Columbia, Athabasca, Beauty Lakes below. Wow. After 30 minutes at the summit, we slowly worked our way back down rubble slopes into the basin and past the lakes. We took our time. Neither of us were 100% gung-ho at this point about slogging up Wurzburg's endless rubble slopes to take in what we assumed to be a less dramatic view from a lower summit and with no views over Jonas Pass, unlike Struan. We slowly started up the broad southwest rubble slopes of Wurzburg Peak just as the sun was at its hottest at around 2:30 in the afternoon. I'm not going to lie, it was a bit of a slog. Everything continued to be very simple, but I wondered what the descent would be like. I managed to find some solid-ish slabs and larger rubble to balance my way up. Views back over Beauty Creek were better than expected. There's Struan. Summit of Wurzburg. It was only 3:30 as we approached the cairn summit of Wurzburg, only taking us around an hour to ascend its easy slopes. We were actually very pleasantly surprised by the views that greeted us. Apparently this lowly peak is worth an ascent after all. My favorite views were to the northwest towards a group of striking peaks north of the Diadem Glacier, including Geck, Nelson, Smythe, and Gong Peak. We lingered a bit at the summit before starting what we assumed to be a semi-horrid descent. It actually wasn't. It was quite fast. We managed to find bits of softer scree runs between the stumbly boulders and rubble. Wurzburg. Hiking across the valley back to the creek, we realized that although we could easily tag Andover Peak before dark, there was no way that Skye was going to happen today. We slowed down our pace a bit and took many photos of the creek and the valley with its deep cracks and ledges. As we hiked up valley towards the ascent slopes for Andover, we scouted routes for Skye Peak the next day. I preferred a direct route from the Andover call directly to the summit, but it looked a bit gnar. There was a steep scree slope leading to a break in the long northwest ridge that also looked like it might be possible. The afternoon was beautiful as we slowly walked up valley and gazed up the steep scree and slab slope that Wietze and Paul had hiked a few weekends previous. We hoped the tracks that Wietze beat into the scree were still there. Witza wasn't 100% sure he felt like a repeat at this point, so I took off ahead of him as we gained the bottom of the steep southwest face of Andover. I was still feeling pretty good, and knew we'd be exiting in the dark at this point, so any daylight we could save was worthwhile. The slope was indeed very steep, and the tracks were still there, making for a much nicer ascent. I was feeling the 3,000 meters of height gain as I broke onto Andover's upper south ridge, but the views back over the deep Andover Creek Valley towards the White Goat Wilderness and back over Andover Tarn to Tangle Peak in the Columbia Icefield kept me distracted enough not to feel it too much. What a special place this is. As I gained a large summit cairn, I was blown away by the views down the colorful Andover Creek Valley with its many lakes and tarns, and the red and gray walls running down its length toward the Brazeau River and the White Goat Wilderness in the far distance. Not for the first time, I was thankful for a body and the life that allows me to enjoy moments like this. I didn't linger long despite the amazing summit views. Witza was waiting for me at the hanging lake and we had a long way to travel yet. My soul was full as I slowly picked my way back down easy rubble slopes to enjoy a late day coffee for energy to get me back to the car. As expected, views of the dying light from the hanging lake were next level. Without permits for the very restricted Beauty Creek and Lakes area, we were forced to come back on day 2 to see if an ascent from the Beauty Creek Valley was possible from near the Andover Col to Skye Peak. The direct route proved to be a little more difficult than we were prepared to handle on this particular day. Another landscape that was more difficult than first expected was the steep scree slope leading to the northwest ridge. Instead of scree, we were disappointed to encounter very steep and hard dirt slopes with scree sitting on top. Despite finding a route onto the northwest ridge of Skye from the Beauty Creek Valley, I would highly recommend simply accessing the ridge from Tangle Pass rather than from the valley below. Unless you combine this peak with Andover, there's no reason to dip into the valley. We worked our way up the ridge slowly, sticking right to the crest wherever possible and deviating climbers right to avoid difficulties before ascending back to the ridge. Slowly we inched our way over a few false summits before finally ascending to the real one. The views to the Columbia Icefields and south to Tangle Peak with its dramatic northeast glaciated face were very respectable. Nice work. Summit of Skye. Whew. If I had to guess, this is going to be a Liam Harrop register. He likes to do glass wrapped in colorful tape. We couldn't actually see Wilcox Lake from the summit, but as we descended south slopes, it came into dramatic view with Tangle Peak rising impressively above it. I never realized before how hard it is to actually hike to this lake from Wilcox Pass, but there's a huge ridge running from Tangle Peak to the northwest, blocking any direct routes. Originally, we wanted to hike right to the shores of Wilcox Lake, but as we descended, we abandoned that option and started hiking across the vast Wilcox meadows to the distant trail, still many kilometers away at this point. On the map, everything looks very simple, but in reality, there are many dips and gains and little landscape or obstacles in the way. It seemed to take a while, but finally we found the Wilcox Pass trail and started our exit to Tangle Creek. From the end of the Alpine Valley, we dropped into Tangle Creek on a good trail and exited back to the trailhead at Tangle Falls.